What's up, guys? Welcome back. Thomas here, and as you might see right now is some B-roll of me doing some painting at the painting desk, and that's a little bit of a teaser of some changes to the channel coming up. So I'm excited to talk to you guys about that, but we'll get into that a little bit later. What I wanted to talk about mainly today is the new update that happened this week. So I'm sure you guys are already aware since you're on YouTube, and probably every other creator by now has put out a handful of videos about these changes. But really, I just wanted to take a look at it pretty broadly, dive deep into a couple of the changes that are pertinent to my factions that I play, and talk about some things that I'm excited about, some things that maybe I'm not so excited about. And then I'd love to hear your thoughts on this update in the comments below. Did you think that more stuff should be changed, or you think less stuff should be changed? And how are your army's force dispositions? As that's probably one of the biggest shakeups for most armies. Let's hop over to the desktop real quick and take a look. So I have the Tyranids Munitorum Field Manual pulled up. So I'm just going to roll through, talk about some of the changes, what I think about it, and get into it. Thankfully here, I didn't actually get hit too bad. So personally, I don't run the Maliceptor, but I've actually talked to a few of the Tyranid players at my shop and seen some some talks online and that sort of thing. And apparently the Maliceptor is doing very, very well this edition. Obviously, it's a psychic monster, so it's pretty tough. It's got a lot of stuff to chew through, pretty decent wound value. It hits pretty hard, but more importantly, its ranged attacks are psychic, so it ignores all the modifiers and that sort of thing, which is something that if you don't have in your army, you kind of are missing out. The ignoring modifiers is actually huge in this edition, I think. And I think unless there's some shakeups to how cover works and some of the just innate abilities of certain things, I think Psychic's going to be just a very strong keyword in this edition, which a lot of people were asking for that last edition. They felt like Psychic didn't really have anything going on last edition, so they kind of push it pretty far, in my opinion. But Maliceptor goes up 10 points, and then of course it has the spam tax as well, which also went up 10 points, so pretty much just a static increase for them. One that really doesn't impact me at all is the Nerd Tyrant going up 15 points. I obviously use this thing, but it's a staple in all Tyranid lists, so I don't think anyone's going to stop running a Neuro Tyrant. It's just we got to find the 15 points somewhere in our list. But I'll talk about where my points are going here in a second. I think it is a unit that everyone uses. I feel like it's almost a necessity just because of Shadow of the Warp impacting the battle shock of your opposing army. We'll put Space Marines specifically more in range of actually having to worry about the battle shock. And of course, if they're in synapse range and that sort of thing, but also the ability to make the Neuralids to basically keep something in synapse within 18, I think is also very strong. It just really helps with getting them into combat, not having to worry about having something behind them. And even though it is just usually my chaff, my Hormagaunts, and that sort of thing that are running up, it does present a pretty legitimate early threat. So I really like the Neuro Tyrant. It's not going anywhere, but also I've not ever seen a list that's running more than one. So, the first 130 points of your list are already there, which is honestly sometimes kind of nice. Outside of that, though, I'm a little surprised like the Neurolictor didn't go up anymore. I feel like that's a really, really strong model now. I'm not complaining that it didn't go up, but just that forced battle shock at the start of your turn, it really does impact the game, especially now with having to unbattle shock effectively. It basically allows you to potentially, even if they get out of battle shock, you can basically use the ability on your turn to get them back into it, and then everything gets a bonus if they're still within that aura, which is 12 inches, which in this edition feels like a lot bigger than in the last edition. But I think that it's a really solid model, and I think more people should be running it that maybe aren't. Toxicrene went down. This is mainly because I believe they added the frame keyword to it, and its tendrils and everything are kind of out of control. So it just ended up, it's easier to hit now. So they made it a little bit cheaper to sort of match that imbalance. Basically everyone's dedicated transport, the first three went down, and the others just stayed the same or went up. And no one's really using Tyrannocyte. It's basically the Tyranid drop pod, but it doesn't really do much outside of that. I don't really think you're wanting to use 80 points to get your stuff up the board any faster, because anything that you're wanting there can either get there pretty early or you can just bring it in from reserves. I feel like it'd be cool to see maybe it have some new rules that could impact the game a bit more, or give us some kind of new Tyranid bioform that can carry our stuff. Maybe something that is more of like a big beast, so it can kind of run up, drop some stuff out, but still have some staying power. I think that could be kind of cool, sort of like a behemoth model that sort of vomits up some smaller bioforms and that sort of thing. But we're not really talking about new models today. Sorry for the slight tangent, but we'll get on to some of the other updates as well. The main place where my 15 points for the Neurotyrant went is my Von Ryan's Leapers. I think I spoke about these last week. I really like this unit a lot. I feel like they're not as good as they were in 10th edition, obviously with the Fight's First changes, but at the same time, they're a present threat. They have stealth and infiltrate, and honestly, a group of 6, T5, 3 wounds each, it's a pretty tough thing to get through. They have a 4-up, 6-up save. Higher AP isn't going to just wipe them as is. They actually have to chew through them. A lot of times these guys are still around turn 4, usually turn 5 even. They're great kind of frontline movement blockers and that sort of deal. So I still really like them. Most of my lists run at least one block of 6, but I will sometimes carry 2 blocks of 6, just because I do like them as immediate threats. And the last change as far as unit point cost is Zoanthropes. The 3 models dropped 10 points to 90, but the 6 models is still 200. Usually you're running them as 6 in a bodyguard unit on your Neurotyrant, to allow your Neurotyrant maybe some more freedom to move up the board. I personally don't do this. I have considered doing it, but really my Neurotyrant usually hangs out in the backfield. And now with the new terrain templates, I've been able to more confidently move it up the board, and still be able to drop the Neuralids and that sort of thing. So I don't know if I'll ever move into these. I do think they're cool models, so I will likely get them eventually just to have them as part of my collection. And after that, I'll likely try running them to see how I like them and see if maybe having a bit more of an aggressive Neurotyrant would do for my army. Now let's talk about detachments. So one of the biggest updates to the edition right now is a lot of detachments are getting their dispositions changed. Purge the Foe is very prevalent in the meta, at least before this update. So they've actually taken Purge the Foe off of a lot of detachments. So the Tyranids detachments actually didn't get hit by this at all. All our detachments remained the same points value. None of our detachment dispositions changed. I think that's pretty good. I don't really think any of them were where they didn't want to be. So I am interested to see kind of some of the directions that we go. So obviously, like I talked about last week in my first game, I played Invasion Fleet, my typical detachment from 10th edition. It's taken hold, which honestly Tyranids are just good at. We have so many bodies. We have, the Norns that can hold objectives and really keep them for a lot of the game and be very difficult to move off of them. So having taken hold on most of our detachments, as you can see, 4 out of our 10 have taken hold, with 3 disruptions, a reconnaissance, and a priority assets. So we're wanting to hold objectives, and we're also kind of wanting to do some actiony shenanigans and that sort of thing. And that's really what Tyranids are really good at. We have a lot of very cost-effective units as well to be able to get places where we need them to. Units that are cheap with lots of models to have good objective control characteristics to get here. Our 1 Purge the Foe detachment, Crusher Stampede. You got big monsters that get stronger as they get beat up. So they're wanting to be into combat, they're wanting to get in close, and they want to take things down. And our monsters are really tough and are able to outlast a lot of turns. So I honestly feel like our dispositions are in a great place. They all feel very thematic. They all make sense for what Tyranids already want to do, and it makes it feel like you're not really having to worry about basically making a list that doesn't fit with your disposition. because whatever the detachment is, what you're putting into it wants to be doing the thing that it's assigned, which I think is the goal for all of them. But they obviously had to pull back purge a little bit because some lists were taking it a bit too far. The only update outside of that to our detachments is we did have an increase in points cost to the Vanguard Onslaught Hunting Grounds, which basically this one is honestly pretty good. And it basically is the one that makes it so whenever anything arrives from reserves on your opponent's side on a 2-up on a dice roll, they must take a battle shock test. So another way to force battle shock. I'm pretty sure my list with Vanguard Onslaught gives this enhancement to my Neuro Tyrant, and I think it's going to be great. I can't wait to actually run that detachment. I just got to get through the backlog I was painting at the start of the video before I could do that. But let's take a look over at Tau. So Tau, I felt like didn't get hit very hard as far as points go. We'll talk about detachments in a second because I do think a couple of the changes were pretty rough. For the most part, points-wise, it's fine. Broadsides, I don't know if there are lists that are running squads of 3 of broadside battle suits. I know I kind of have joked about doing it just because I think it would be kind of funny to do it, to have like 3 units of 3 broadsides, because they are just they are good. At least they were really good last edition. I think the missile pods in this edition are much better than they were last edition. But yeah, this is just kind of an interesting one for me. I may be missing something. Let me know in the comments if you guys know that this is a common sort of tactic among Tau, that they're running squads of 3, and there's a good reason to have that increased point cost for that 3rd model, or if it's just something to try and disparage us from doing that. Farsight going down 10 points is pretty good. I mean, 70 points, and he's cheaper than the other commanders, which is kind of crazy, but I think he being cheaper makes sense because of the ability to spam certain guns in the other commander suit variants is really good. I think most people that play Retaliation Cadre or play with the battle suits are going to run a Farsight to lead one of your crisis suit units. Most people are going to be running it. I think this is a good thing for them. I personally don't run epic heroes in my Tau lists. It's just for my army's kind of flavor. That's just something that I don't really do. I don't really use epic heroes too much in Tyranids either, except I have the Swarmlord, but that's just because I built the Swarmlord first. But I do really like him. And with the Tyranids, it's kind of like any high fleet can have a Swarmlord. It's like the specific genetic chain for the Swarmlord is used for that. So it kind of makes sense for Tyranids to kind of all have it because they can all exist. But anyway, I have a weird thing with like epic heroes and stuff like that. Devilfish, their dedicated transport, kind of like what I was saying before, pretty much all the dedicated transports went down for your first 3 and then went up for your 4th or higher. I think they're trying to get people to use dedicated transports a bit more. I'm not really sure why, I guess, but it just seems to be they're kind of pushing it. There could be something there where they're trying to, maybe they're sort of hinting at a possibility of something changing in the future of this edition where transports might be worth a bit more and something that's a bit easier to use. Or, their sales could be down and they're trying to sell a few off, so they're making them cheap so that way people buy them and then they'll hike them back up to their normal cost. Ghost Kill battle suits, we have a spike on the 3rd unit cost, but we also have a 5-point increase for the Cyclic Ion Raker. I use the Ion Raker. It's plus 5 points. Honestly, it's not really impacting my list really at all. My old lists, a lot of them were at like 1990, 1995. For me, this actually just makes me right at 2000, so not complaining at all. Hammerhead Gunship, really good tank. Makes sense that it's going up in points. I think they're seeing a good amount of play. I don't really run tanks. I'm pretty much battle suits only, so it's not really impacting me at all. Similar with the Pathfinder team in the last month or so was basically with the Pathfinder team, you would run the Advanced Acquisitions Cadre along with Retaliation Cadre, and Pathfinders and Stealth Suits kind of got a little bit of a buff. They got some enhancements and some good stratagems to use. So I think we're actually seeing a bit of a sort of rubber banding from how good they were at the start of this edition, and that's why their points have gone up. Now that you can't do that match if this is still valid, but we'll talk a little bit about detachments in a second. But there still are good detachments that are still at 2 detachment points where you can tag in advanced acquisition. Riptides went up, Triptides went up, and their war gear costs went up. So these guys are very expensive now to run. I know I saw a couple lists that were at least running 2, and some were running 3. So definitely just a reaction to what people are doing with marker light and guidance, able to ignore and strip cover from people. It's just pretty brutal. Also, Riptide can fly, so it's able to do take to the skies, and it already moves pretty fast. I believe it's like 12-inch movement. So it's able to get up the board very quickly. So it was likely being able to get into detection range, take out things that it shouldn't have been able to take out, and then basically removing your opponent's front line before they even get a chance to really do anything. A big battle suit that is oppressive early. It kind of makes sense that it's getting pointed up. I was pretty surprised by this. Storm Surge went up in points by 15. So it's actually almost at the point of, if you're wanting to run it, you run 1, but you're definitely not going to be running 2 or more, because, I mean, 400 points, good Lord. That's a very significant portion of a 2,000 point list. It is pretty solid. It's Titanic, so it gets the towering plunging fire rule with stuff within 12. So pretty good. I haven't gotten a chance to use mine, but I probably will use one at some point. Probably a change that was needed, honestly. Twin Lance goes up, having a battle suit that's good at shooting and in melee and has some reactive move kind of shenanigans. Makes sense. Up 15 points at 220 is a lot, I feel like. But at the same time, it probably has a similar-ish output to a Riptide, so it kind of makes sense to have it be in the same bracket of points, especially because it can punch as hard, but then also be able to save itself by doing its extra movement. I think it just feels bad for people because it came in at the end of 10th. It got a points hike, I believe, at the start of 11th, and then we're also seeing another points hike. So this thing has gone up probably 30 points since its release, which isn't out of the norm for a GW, honestly. It actually happens quite a bit where something comes in, they make it a little too good, and then it just keeps getting still good. So they have to either nerf it with points or nerf it with rewriting data sheets. And just depending on what data slate we're in and what time of the year, can result in varied changes. But I think right now they're doing more point shifting instead of rewriting rules, because I think there's still some rules interactions that they're trying to make sure make sense before they update rulings too much. And then the Tiger Shark, this thing went up a ton. This thing must be really seeing play in a bunch of different stuff. It's a tank. I don't really run it, so I don't really have a lot of experience with playing with one. I might have to take a look after this and just take a look at some lists that are running it, because I'm just not a big tank guy, but obviously 2 railguns and a bunch of seeker missiles, I think that might be something to look into. But the fact that it is the same price as a Storm Surge and the second one cost more than a second Storm Surge must mean that it was putting in some serious work. But moving on to detachments. So firstly, unfortunately, Retaliation Cadre went up to 3 detachment points, but it kept Purge the Foe. So I think that's a good balance, in my opinion. I kind of hate that it's 3. I would have really loved to actually play with Advanced Acquisition Cadre at least once. Probably should have ran them last weekend, honestly, just to get that under my belt. But I kind of had a feeling it was going to be pretty good, and seeing some of the lists that were doing that, it seemed like a no-brainer combination that a lot of people were doing. So it kind of makes sense that they ended up swapping that out. But then also Monka and Kalyan both had their dispositions changed. Monka is now priority assets, Kalyan being reconnaissance. And in this case, Monka being Purge the Foe before was super strong. You were able to get up the board so quickly. Monka basically gave all Tau units assault, and then during the first, second, and third phases, while you were a guided, those attacks had lethal hits, and it was Purge the Foe before. Kalyan switched from priority assets to reconnaissance, which kind of makes sense. It allows you to be a little bit more at a distance, but Kalyan being sort of not necessarily the opposite of Monka. For Kalyan, basically its rule is in 3rd, 4th, and 5th battle round, your ranged weapons gain sustained hits 1, and then during those 3 turns, while your unit is guided, you can ignore modifiers to ballistic skill and to the hit roll. So they basically become like psychic weapons. So you're ignoring cover, which you're probably already stripping anyway, but also any other thing that they do to reduce your hit roll, reduce your ballistic skill, it ignores that as well. Mutka switching away from Purge the Foe is definitely going to have a lot of people jumping to Retaliation Cadre. I think that with Tau, while we do have a good amount of like movement stuff and the ability to get around the board, I think that killing stuff is just overall our army's most efficient way of playing. So it won't surprise me if Retaliation Cadre sees further changes, which will kind of suck. I mean, now it's at the max detachment points, so it makes me wonder where they will be going next with that, because I do think that no matter where they put Purge is probably where a lot of more competitive lists are going to go. The ability to kind of stock your list up with really good units that can really take a chunk out of the enemy is just going to be the direction that a lot of players go. But as far as the Munitorium stuff, so points changes and detachment changes, I feel like I came out pretty okay. Not many of the units that I actually run really got impacted too much. I'm already used to just running Retaliation Cadre, so just moving that into 11th edition I think is going to be all right with me. But yeah, let me know how your army's fared on this side of things, and we're going to take a look at the future of the channel here in a bit, and then we'll talk about the specific updates to some of the army rules. So right now, you're probably seeing a top-down view of my painting desk, and you may have noticed that some of the changes to my channel's homepage. So now I'm transitioning away from the Elderwood Games kind of tag and moving into Elderwood Minis. So one thing I've kind of realized is that for me, I'm much more of a hobbyist. I enjoy talking about the game, and that aspect isn't going to change too much. But I'm a big proponent of the hobbying side as well as the community aspect. So what I want to try and do is maybe shift more into that space. So what I want to do is begin doing live streams weekly. And for a time, that will likely replace my scheduled content on Saturdays, and shifting just to kind of get used to having, my usual recording evening now be for live streams and working on those and hanging out with you guys as we kind of build, paint, and discuss the game. If there's anything that comes out of those or anything that I feel strongly about that I'd like to be in a dedicated video, I can do that. And it may also allow me to put a little bit more time into those videos to be able to provide you guys with a little bit better experience. One reason that I'm not filming like I normally do is because I have my setup set up for paint desk work and that sort of thing, and I'm still kind of fine tuning that, so I want to make sure that what I've already tweaked kind of can stay where it is, so that way it's just a little bit easier for me and that sort of thing. So I'll be posting on my Instagram at elderwood.minis about when I'll be going live. Right now we're planning on Thursday evenings around 5 p.m. Eastern time. So if you guys can come and hang out, that would be awesome. I'd love to see you guys there and, spend some time, get to hang and talk about the game, and, we'll be painting together and that sort of deal. I have a new project that's coming up that I'll talk with you guys about when I'm actually starting it. But this first live stream is probably going to be working through some of my Tyranids that I'm trying to get done before the end of the year, as you probably are seeing now. But I hope you guys can join me in that endeavor, and like I said before, I'll be posting here on YouTube as well as over on my Instagram about when I'll be going live. But let's go ahead and wrap up the discussion about the update with just some of the other changes that happened to my factions, and then some of the other sort of aspects of changes for the core rules and that sort of thing. So the main change for Tyranids for me is Tyranid warriors with bioweapons. they used to have the same ability as Blade Guard veterans. You had the ability to either reroll hits of 1 or reroll saves of 1 at the beginning of the fight phase. That has been updated now to you can either increase the melee attacks by 1 strength or increase their toughness by 1. And I actually think this is a pretty good change. Their Tyranid Warrior Claws and Talons have a strength of 5 already. So because they are synapse, they gain the synapse benefit. So that pushes them up to 6 in melee. So they're already 6. So they're wounding a lot of lower infantry on 2s already. And even, Space Marines and stuff like that on 3s. Unfortunately, +1 strength doesn't really push them into having anything else on 2s, but some stronger toughness things will have them wounding on 3s, which isn't terrible. But also increasing their toughness from 5 to 6 has a better chance of being able to drop them out of getting wounded on 2s or 3s, depending what's being fought into them. So I think you're going to have a more reliable choice, maybe. I like rerolling hits of 1. It's just nice and quick, but I think this one has the opportunity to give us a bit more punching power. So I am kind of excited for that, especially now that I'm probably transitioning a little bit out of Invasion Fleet, which wants you to be re-rolling into crit hits and that sort of deal. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays on the tabletop, but I feel like it's a good thing. One thing I discussed in a previous video is kind of abilities that gave benefit of cover, but also gave stealth. And because now those are basically the same thing in 11th edition, I was interested to see this change with Venom Thropes. Now they basically give an aura stealth, which basically grants benefit of cover to those around it. So I think that this is actually kind of better. Giving everything cover within 6 inches is pretty good. I do kind of wish that we had kept some of the small, basically before it was everything got stealth, so everything was -1 to hit, and then smaller things also got the benefit of cover, so they were harder to wound, or they were better at saving, I guess is technically the right way to phrase that. And I think it would be kind of cool if it was still infantry and swarm units gain +1 save or something like that. But at the same time, I think it's an okay change. They didn't get any points changes. Maybe they should have gone down a little bit. Overall, not terrible, more of a lateral change, if anything. And then honestly, Tau really didn't have any updates as far as written rules go. So nothing really to talk about here, at least for me. They slightly changed an enhancement in Mondka to basically give a couple of units Scout 6. They added a few things to the frame keyword list, probably just to make sure that everything that should have frame has it and that sort of deal. So with the event companion, so obviously if you play competitively or if you play in a store that uses this sort of as a means to keep games balanced, there are a few changes to layouts, basically making a lot of the Purge the Foe ones have additional center objectives to basically make it more difficult for a unit to just sit on the middle objective and shoot out of it, and then also for Disruption to have a few more objectives to be able to do what they need to do, which I think overall will be a good change. I haven't had a ton of odd mixes like that. Then they ironed out that yes, you can only get 1 additional command point, just like in 10th edition. You can get your point for the turn, and then each battle round you can get 1 additional one, whether by discarding or by a unit special rule. So they just ironed that one out. And then they have a couple of FAQs here that I thought was interesting. They basically clarified that the points scored at the end of the battle are not subject to the 15-point limit. So this basically means that on your final turn, you could have a big go turn. It could be enough to help swing some of that player going second has the advantage. And then on the flip side as well, it could also make it so they could catapult ahead a bit more. So still kind of interesting to see, because I guess that would actually mean that a perfect game would be 110 points technically, but I think they still have max points capped at 100. So, but yeah, I think that overall the changes were all necessary. Probably. I think that in some cases, they may have gone a little too far. You know, they're in an interesting spot, right? We're at the beginning of a new edition. A lot of things are changing. They're not wanting to change too many things. So it's not about quantity of changes. It's kind of about quality of changes. So when they change something, they're also thinking about, okay, well, when we do this again in a month, we either want to correct now so that way this thing doesn't continue to be as problematic as it is now. So that way we can focus on other things. Or if we see that this change isn't enough to promote no longer using maybe this busted unit or that sort of thing, they know that they need to either hike it in points again, or what will likely happen to a lot of these like bigger adjusted units is they will likely be looking at data sheets going forward, similar to what they did with the Defiler. So the Defiler had, so yeah, when we look at something like the Defiler here, they obviously, the points cost for one stayed the same, but the second one went up by 10. But also the las cannons and autocannons, which come in pairs already, so each of these is basically plus 10 points, they are doing their best to try and tax you out of it, I think, at least out of your second or third one. But I think that if the Defiler continues to be as problematic as it is now across the Chaos factions, I think we're likely to see a change in its datasheet abilities. Don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know, what those changes might be. It might just, and they might honestly just like kick the points up a bit more. They don't want to necessarily lose its strength. They might push one of these two weapons up even further. Obviously, autocannons are primarily better into the infantry and chaff, while las cannons will be a little bit better into your medium to heavy kind of things. It's an interesting point in the edition where we're just starting out. I think that this is a good change that they're doing these more frequent updates here at the beginning, so that way they can better track what's happening. They're more involved in kind of what is happening now, so it's not just radio silence and having us, suffer from a like rough start of the edition, which honestly I don't really see that this has been a rough start. I think the roughest bit was that Purge the Foe kind of disparity. Like if you're playing against Purge the Foe, like they're incentivized to kill you. They're gonna be able to kill things and score points easier. So having it be a thing where they're doing the thing they want to, they're also limiting your resources because they're killing your resources, and they're able to kind of steamroll on points. It makes sense that a lot of those changes happened and took Purge the Foe away from some detachments that can really abuse it, and also making it harder for armies that really are capable of killing a ton of units, have a harder time or have to spend all 3 detachment points to get to Purge the Foe. It's a really unique way of balancing the game that I actually kind of appreciate, and it'll be interesting to see what further changes might happen in the next update. I'm really hoping they don't do changes that affect the cards that we play with, just because that's a really rough thing for newer players to deal with. You buy this deck of cards, you buy your codex as well, and then they're basically obsolete from day one because of some errata that happened, but all that to be seen. That about wraps it up this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this is a little different than my normal stuff, but also as I talked about in the middle of the video, there are some changes happening to this channel, and I hope you guys will stick around for it and join me on this kind of next phase of my Warhammer content creation journey, and I'd love to see you guys in the next one.